there's so many frightening things about how the crisis is being covered now. I think one of the first things is that the president immediately talked about the attacks on September 11th as an act of war, and the mainstream media immediately accepted that language. And if it's an act of war, then a lot of things follow from that. Not least of which is that we mobilize that the U.S. mobilizes its troops, that it prepares for various kinds of military action, that various kinds of it even assumes that various kinds of attacks where there may be civilian casualties are justified because, after all, that happens in a war, and so forth. And by adopting this language, the media closes off other ways to understand what happened, and therefore other possible ways of addressing it. So that, for example, if it's understood as a crime, a colossal crime, then one way of addressing it may be through international law and international court structures rather than through a war. That's not something that even gets debated if the language of war is immediately adopted. And what I think we saw almost instantaneously was a fusing of the government voice with the mainstream corporate media voice. And this, of course, is terribly dangerous. And we saw it very well during the Gulf War, and it's happening instantaneously here now as well. And I think one of the ways that it's so obvious that I find so completely disturbing is with the little logos that the networks have all come up with for their ongoing coverage of this. Many of them have the word war in them, America's New War, some of the others I don't remember, but for sure every single one of them has a flapping American flag. And a news program should never have any kind of flapping flag. It should always be independent. I mean, absolutely. And it's just horrifying for me to see that jingoism coming from what ought to be independent voices of the media. At a time of wars, arguably when we need independent media most of all, and instead we're getting jingoistic media. You hear anchor people saying "we" when they're talking about, say, the mobilization of army troops or something like that. They'll say, we sent 10,000 troops, or and so forth. And this I think is incredibly dangerous.